I believe we have Jennifer and Rebecca
Okay.
should be here.
What do y'all think about just making the meeting start at 1:15?
I mean,
I think Jennifer has a pretty regular thing.
oh, she does.
Well, she typically comes in around 1:10.
All my tardiness is due to like poor time management, I'll admit, and so.
1:15 might not help.
Don't move it to 1:15, you'll see me at 1:30 most of the time, trying really hard to be on time. But if it suited the group to move it later, I don't have an objection to that, it wouldn't make any difference in my, so, just a thought.
Permission from school to.
See, that's the thing on the other side,
It's
yeah.
on the other
Yeah.
side, but because they have aftercare, at the school, instead of last year when it's preschool and I have to be there at 3:30, you can stay until 5, it's just a long day for it.
Totally justified.
It seems
Well, I
like he's
don't-
having fun whenever I think about it.
It's gonna incur extra expense for people either. Yeah.
Actually, what's the difference between a vicinity plan and a site plan?
Not much. The differentiation at the state level, because ours, well, a vicinity plan then to me would mean, a site plan is typically your parcel. A vicinity plan will sort of bring on the surrounding areas as well. That's my guess. We ask for site plans with permit applications, all permits, building permits, whatever. But we put vicinity maps on our.
Oh, you guys just got muted. Oh, now you're back.
We're not talking about any task force stuff.
Talking about,
Oh yeah, I was lilistening and then like the vicinity maps, and I think I cut off right before you were going to say staff report, but
What would be the purpose of this?
It's kind of to zoom out to sort of understand contextually how your project parcel fits and might possibly impact the surrounding area. Andrew does vicinity maps that we've been calling cumulative impact maps, where it shows on staff reports, it shows like, here's the blip of this permit application, and there are other blips of larger or lesser size to show other permits either issued or pending in that like 3-mile radius, or is it a 1 mile? So just to sort of zoom out to kind of help the planning commissioner, the deciding body, to have a more contextual understanding.
Good to know.
yeah, I do it at 1 mile and 3 miles. So, and we're starting to add more information, not just there's so many projects approved or pending in this area. And well, here's what they are. Are they active? Are they not? What's their size? Is it mixed light or outdoor? So,
Is that automatic for
Very
every project?
ambitious that we're gonna do.
every project that we've been taking to the Planning Commission for approval or denial since 2022, but it's not necessarily required. It is a factor in CEQA. One problem with that is that without a programmatic EIR, we don't have that scientific basis and study to show, well, what's the limit, what's the threshold when too much is too much. So we really need a bigger environmental study to make a clear, scientifically backed threshold.
Correct.
So your threshold you're saying is a mile?
It's not necessarily a threshold, it's more a proximity.
Okay.
It's letting, the planning commissioners who are the decision makers, let them know what other projects are within the vicinity and what proximity to this project. So, and then in general vicinity maps, I just try to make sure there's a geographical feature like Clear Lake or City of Kelseyville or something where people can look at it and understand where in the county it's at. So.
Yeah, exactly. Good point. Yeah, sometimes it'll be a major roadway, something that gives them context.
Mm-hmm. And that's what major basically it's for, is just to give them more context.
It's an information. Yeah. But it does be helpful. He developed that in response to the planning commission's request for some sort of like visual image to help them with that. Particularly, Andrew, would you say that it was particularly because of their interest in water use?
Yeah, I think water use and just other concerns. It's primarily water use. I don't know. There's a lot of different reasons why you'd be concerned if there's,
No,
X amount of projects popping up in this one area. So,
yeah. No, I mean, we do it, but it just seems like it's not taken into consideration because the tribe does it. I mean, we're trying to textualize exactly the project side and then what can be around it. And we're looking
Well, that makes sense.
and we're looking
because-
at waterways, but
Uh-huh.
when we're bringing it to the table, it's like, well, no, we're just talking about PUD.
When you bring what to the table?
If we
Like
have
at what?
consultation, say we bring it to the consultation table about concerns that are, say, within, I don't know, a half mile.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, and there's a lot of indicators that show that there could be concerns that are there, something to think about.
Okay.
But it just seems like it's more fight, trying to explain, well, there's a bigger picture to this that, it's
Sure.
just gonna be, but I've never heard the vicinity map
Mhm.
of the project. That it's coming from.
I'd like to join one of the next consultations that we have then, just so I can gather more data on that.
Yeah. No, 'cause
Because I understand when you're talking about cultural sites, it's not like you had fences around it,
Right.
you know? Yeah.
Right, and I think that's always the argument that we're making, and I keep having to tell them, you didn't look out of the Tule hut and just kind of go, okay, well, I'm to get from here to there, I'm gonna jump on every rock and,
Right,
you know
right,
what I
right.
mean? So
Yeah.
I think those are the kind of,
That could be a communication thing that I think we
Yeah.
could bridge easily.
no, this is the first time I've heard of it, so.
Mhm.
okay, well, we are looking at 1:09 p.m. I can't see the full room, but I think we have 5 in there. We're just waiting for Jennifer. Did Rebecca make it?
We have 4.
4. Okay. Oh, right. And that's Ruby, I guess, on the other side of Robert.
Yes. And in comes Jennifer. We now have quorum.
Okay. Well, with that said, I think, Ruby, can you confirm that Rebecca was going to come, but she might be a little late? Was that the case?
No, Rebecca said she will be here.
Okay. So I guess we'll be seeing Rebecca soon.
She
She was driving.
At 2:30.
So I think she was on her way.
She's close. Oh, sorry.
Okay, well, I guess we can go ahead and get started. We've got a couple of discussions to have. It's going to be kind of a more of an open format for the meeting when we get to those discussion items. Hoping to get more input from all the task force members and help get a clearer picture of how we're going to move forward. But with that said, let's go ahead and move on. On the agenda today, we will go through our roll call, and then we will look at the minutes from September 5th and 18th again, as well as October 13th. I have to confirm that should be November. Maybe Ruby can.
Yeah, the agenda
Speak to
is
that.
November 13th.
Yeah, this October should read November. And then we will get into a discussion on some of the general application requirements. Really, we're not making any motions on that. We're just starting the conversation, as well as discussion on outlining the new Article 73, our cannabis ordinance. We looked at the outline and the ordinance that we're working with right now last week. Sorry to throw all of that at you, but if we're going to write a new ordinance, we got to know what we're working with. So with that said, let's go ahead and move on to roll call. There is some news with the roll call. Our South Lake County representative, Jan Coppinger, has stepped back from taking a seat on the task force. She's involved with something with the city of Lakeport, and there's some conflicting schedule issues. She's got a lot of those meetings with engineers on Monday, so she just felt bad that she wasn't going to be able to commit to the task force as much as she had hoped. So Maria, maybe you can give an update. I think the board is going to be looking at filling that seat fairly soon.
They are. I don't remember the date. I don't think it's Tuesday, but they follow the state law and do advertise for vacancies countywide to fill that spot. So at a future board meeting, they'll consider all the applications that have come in.
Okay, sounds good. I'll talk to you later. I could maybe dig up some of the old applications as well, but we'll talk later. Let's go ahead and get the roll call. So is William Weiss there?
Present.
All right, Jan Coppinger is not. Catherine Vanderwall is not present as well. She could not make it. We knew that. Rebecca Harper, not quite yet. Jennifer Smith?
Here.
Nara Del Baca,
Present.
Robert Geary,
Here.
and I believe we have Paul Blues from Kelseyville Fire District. Okay. On to the next item, consideration of minutes from September 5th, September 18th, and again, that should read November 13th. I will pass this back on to Ruby in the room. There was some confusion. I think for the most part, it was cleared up. Some people are going to go back and review. I think it was the main source of confusion was the September 18th meeting. So with that said, I'm going to let you guys take over at this point.
For September 5th meeting minutes, does the task force have any questions, comments before we open it up for public input? Okay, I see that Holly has her hand up. Go ahead, Holly. One moment.
Okay, finally, the unmute button didn't come up. Okay, once again, I just wanted to go through that. The September 5th minutes, as far as what I see, there's still under type 9, no mention of SR, CR, or U in the minutes, but they are on the chart. Then in the minutes, they've asterisk C3, but it's not asterisk on the chart, so that is a question. Do you want to look at that first before I go to the others?
One moment. So on type 9, there was no mention of SRCR. What was that last one?
Or U?
Relaunch the email and make the motion.
All right, so in the meantime, is that in the, good. So since the last meeting, Ruby has rewatched that video and did not see any motions made on that. Holly, can you speak to where you're getting that data?
Where I'm getting what data?
The SRCR and that third one are not included.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that in the minutes, under section 5, where Will made the motion that was seconded, there is no mention of SR, CR, or U in the minutes, but it is on the chart. Additionally, C3 is asterisk in the minutes, but not on the chart, so I don't know what that means.
Ah, okay, so she's talking about right there, the C3 asterisk. But in here, it doesn't mention. Okay, so then on number 5, type 9 delivery license in all cultivation zones in which cannabis cultivation is a pre-existing ancillary use.
No, currently does not show as an asterisk.
Can you speak up a little? It's very hard to hear.
The second one.
Says previously recommended.
And once again, if we could get the table and charts and things dated and maybe rev leveled so that we know which ones we're really looking at.
I believe on the website they are dated.
Right, but not-
Ruby has
not in
placed
the-
them up there.
Right, but not in the minutes. I mean, not, it's not on anything that's submitted with the minutes.
So on type 9, I see on the table, I see SR, CR, and did you say M2 was the other one?
SR,
You.
And U?
You.
I'm not really all that concerned about U, just because we don't have U. U is unclassified, which is no longer legal.
Right, and I'm not saying one thing or another, I'm just saying they don't match.
Because cultivation is not allowed there, is what you're saying.
No, what I'm saying is what you have in the minutes does not mention that the task force approved SR, CR, or U, but it is
Exactly.
in the chart.
Yeah, no, I think I hear what you're saying. Because the motion in the minutes is that it be allowed in all cultivation zones in which it's a pre-existing use. And so when I look at, what I think that you're telling me is, or telling us is that type 9 CR does not have cultivation. So that should not have a dot.
No, look at the top of the minutes on, just above 6.
Oh, I was looking at the wrong thingy. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
No.
Yeah, that's the second one with the asterisk. Okay, Ruby?
And so, well, on this, going through the minutes, when I reviewed the minutes, I just listened to the video and I wrote down like verbatim what was said. So if what was said in the minutes is not matching on the chart, that means that this particular chart didn't get updated.
So it did say in the minutes C3 with an asterisk?
Because I went through and
That's what
looked
the
at.
minutes say.
Okay, so when you watch the video, this was as done. Okay, so the table itself then does not reflect that?
Doesn't have the asterisk.
Okay.
Well, it also does not list SR or CR in the minutes.
Right,
Right,
or you.
so there's still a discrepancy.
Which we didn't, or the motion didn't have that included.
But it's in the table. So that should be good.
That's, I
Well,
knew,
that's
I
what
knew
I'm
this
saying, is
was.
whatever update in the table, like whatever, if it's showing for you, it was the previous update. It wasn't this particular day.
Right, but we're.
So that's why we have to look at the version of the table. Because on the minutes itself, this is what was said. So we never did any motion on the U or anything like that. And that was there from the previous table. That's why it means it says previously recommended all that. It's because
Okay.
these zones.
So the table that is not attached to the minutes that we're considering right now, but is on the September 18th.
Yes. So it should have been the prior table before the updated one that we have in front of us.
Okay, so there was a table attached to September 18th, but it's not what was called the final at that time.
Right.
Which is why it would be great if we could get these labeled.
And I think that's what, I'm always saying with the versions, it would be a lot easier to interpret the minutes because we could see it with the versions of the table.
Which is great, but what do we do now? I mean, that makes absolute sense to me, but we don't have that, so what do we want to do now? Because I thought that we were taking this extra time so that we could get all of this synchronized.
I'll look at that. Compare it to the table, you mean?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't know I needed to print out, I would have printed out every single version. And that would
Are you able to identify the table versions and connect them to the minutes? That could be
Yeah, that's actually,
because unless we made a motion on the 18th that changed the approved stuff on the 5th, this table should reflect all of that.
We did make a motion on the 18th for, we went through a series of 4 revisions on the 18th with finally a final table that everyone agreed on, and that was approved, and that's up on our website.
Right,
It
but
was
you
still
did not,
evolving on the 15th.
you did not talk about type 9 there.
Exactly.
quick question, so
Yeah.
what Paul just pointed out, it's not looking at the table that is included in our packet, but it's looking at the listing thereof there, on the following page. If you look at number 12, type 9, retail delivery only, the way it is listed here is, I believe, we think, maybe that's correct, or rather, Paul, tell me, just jump.
No, isn't that the correct verbiage over what was?
What we said, or not?
Yeah.
Because, Ruby, you said you went back to the video and double checked, and you said that you verified that on September 5th, I made a motion that included the language as stated here in this text. You verified that, is that correct? Okay, so, if that's the case, and the chart, shows SR, CR, and U, well, it seems to me that if I didn't say that, then it shouldn't be on the chart. But then that raises the question of what is this next page after the chart? Is that everything that wound up on the chart, but maybe that also needs to be edited, or, I mean, and obviously, I think it's worth saying so that no one else on the public comment has to say it. If we were to try and revisit this, of course, we'd have to agendize it and talk about it at the next meeting and so on and so forth, but I feel a little bit bad that it came out of my mouth that something that is now being either misrepresented or perhaps incorrectly represented, whatever it is. And so it seems to me that if I didn't say SRCRU, they shouldn't be on the chart and they shouldn't be in whatever this summation of the chart is thereafter. Am I wrong?
This confusion, so this sounds kind of odd, but on July 24th, if I look back at the minutes, there was some confusion on the exact, on what we're speaking of right now with the type 10, the type 9 and type 10.
So you're
Which is
saying
why we
that-
brought it back later.
So that's why, and that's where the SR, C1, CH, and CR comes in.
I think the narrative sheet, the list makes sense because on number 5 of September, the first September one, that motion before we get to all the listing of the zones says that the allow a type 9 delivery license in all cultivation zones in which cannabis cultivation is pre-existing. So if we go to the list, type 9, there's SR with an asterisk or with a 1 now, showing that it would be ancillary, which is consistent because cultivation is allowed there. And then with the minor use permit, all of those on the top that have a 1 is where cannabis is already existing. And the ones that are not asterisks, which C3 is not in the list, are consistent because there is not already cannabis cultivation allowed there. So those would not have the asterisks.
Okay.
So to me, that list makes great sense. It mirrors number 5 exactly.
Okay.
Except that in number 5, that asterisk is still there on number 5. We can amend that and remove that asterisk
Okay.
because it's not consistent.
And then, so, and just to, sorry, speak this a little bit more. So it says,
Hey, Rebecca.
about the July 24th. The reason it was phrased as such is because it was referencing the March 13 minutes to mirror the exact recommendations. So if you look back on the March 13th minutes, it has the, right here, Member Smith moved to recommend the cannabis plans. Zoning chart is written with the section received and into and include consent. With the retail sales. So it's time and since March.
Retail sales storefront.
Retail
This is
sales.
delivery only, type 9.
Storefront, I see the incidental.
I do, yep, you're right. On type 10 it is, not on type 9. So it is still consistent within our minutes as we have them. If we amend the minutes on the face to remove that asterisk on C3 on number 5. Okay. Holly, your hand is still up. What else?
Okay, it's very hard to hear you. So what happened to the CR and, excuse me, the SR and the CR?
Yep. So SR will have an asterisk because cannabis cultivation is already allowed there. And CR will not because cannabis cultivation is not already allowed or permitted use there.
Okay, so that wasn't my question actually. Are you amending the minutes to include SR and CR in section 5, even though that wasn't what was said in the motion?
Okay, so SR and then CR. So SR makes sense that it could have been omitted from Will, let's throw Will under the bus, his motion specifying different zoning because SR would have been covered under, actually, I don't think Will missed out. I think the SR is covered in the previous motion that Jennifer Smith made regarding where cannabis is already allowed.
It seems to me that you've got to get the minutes to match, and maybe it's just a matter of modifying the minutes or re-voting on it or something.
All right, so in order to make those match, we can do so by adding SR to that second motion. So we're removing the
and CR.
Hold on, CR is a separate thought process, just a second.
Got
SR, I think we can add to that motion. CR, let's talk about. Because that is not an already existing cannabis use. And if it's not listed specifically in this, and Ruby did not hear it in the motion, we cannot add it unless the task force wants to amend that motion, but let's check, hold on, unless there is something on September 18th regarding, but nothing was type 9, so I'm not seeing where we keep that. Is anybody seeing where we keep that unless we make a separate agenda item for that to add CR in the future? Or separate agenda item in the future to add CR, because to me, it looks like that needs to be removed. What is task force?
Well, the motion on the 18th was for a comprehensive table that covered everything after back and forth on all the different zoning districts. So I don't know if that can help amend this, but I just wanted to put that out there.
The motion, if it doesn't include that, we would have to
Correct.
vote on it again,
Right,
so
that's
that
what I'm
it,
saying.
it doesn't really.
So we're removing CR as a typographical error on the table.
Well, okay. Taken. Why, what is the thought process on SR and what makes it different?
SR is different because SR would be covered in this first motion that would allow for
But that-
type 9 where cannabis is already an allowed or permitted
But
use.
that motion didn't carry. That motion was followed by the task force discussed how to properly phrase the motion, and then you arrive at what I said.
Yes,
And so without
You're right.
meaning to be a real stick.
No, you're totally right. I
It
was just
doesn't-
looking at the beginning part of that and assumed it was passed, but you're right.
You are correct that what Jennifer said at the time had to have been the thought basis point for whatever I then wound up phrasing out there, but.
But if
I
SR was
phrased
left
this-
out, we can't put it in.
And my phrasing doesn't even
Yeah,
make
you're
reference to what Jennifer said, let alone, yeah, so I don't feel that SR, CR, or you, I mean, again, just credit to Holly for having found it, but if the record doesn't show that I said that, then it probably shouldn't be on.
No, I completely agree. Yeah, I'm used to action minutes, not play-by-play minutes, so I looked at that and thought, oh, that was an action, but I was wrong. So you're right, so we cannot add SR, however, I'm still voting that we remove that asterisk on C3. We also cannot add CR at this time. So we're left with then, for these particular set of minutes, the only amendment being a fixing of a typographical error of an asterisk on C3.
and that was, I just found on August 21st, and I did note that I needed to remove
C3 or
that.
CR.
Okay. So that is.
So that's actually just a typographical error.
But meanwhile, the chart as demonstrated as part of the September 18th minutes should not reflect SR with any sort of marking, CR with any sort of marking, or U with any sort of marking under the row type for type 9.
Correct.
Am I correct in saying that?
Yes.
Okay.
But we're not gonna amend the table on September 18th until after we do this.
Fair enough, I'm just.
Good. All right.
Okay, so the table was amended October, so just so that you know.
Thank you.
Okay, now this isn't all, section 7. Okay, so, and this is probably just a typographical, but PDC for type 5 is not listed in the text.
PDC for type 5 not listed in which part of the text?
In the narrative.
The back of the chart,
Oh, the chart?
the back of the chart, the text.
Yeah, the list. I see it in the PDC. I see in the list.
You do for type 5?
Totally, yeah.
Wait, what? I don't. Type 5.
Wait, this list? This is the list? PDC.
Yeah, it's
March
there.
type 5.
Yep, okay.
Yeah.
Unless I have something else written there. Okay, I see that there.
It's
Then the last thing, I don't know if this is the minutes or not, but since the chart changed so that you have *1, *2, *3, in my notes I have down that, let me just pull this thing back, for type 13 and type 11, it
Wait,
has,
Molly,
Yeah,
On that, is any of that still pertaining to the first set of minutes, or should we?
I don't know, since the chart, I don't know where it fits in because the chart changed.
Okay, keep going.
So if I can just tell you and you can tell me if it fits.
Yeah,
All right, so anyway, for type 13 and type 11, the chart's now changed, so it has the asterisk 1, asterisk 2, asterisk 3. Now, asterisk 2, I believe, says only allowed as an incidental use in processing or manufacturing.
hold on to that, because that's actually our next set of minutes when we did amendments on 11 and 13, so hold on to that thought. Is there anything left on September, whatever this date was, 5th?
I don't believe so.
Okay, is there any other public input on September 5th? If not, we'll bring it back to the task force for consideration and action.
I'm never making another motion.
Come on, get back on the horse. Wait, nobody made, he made a non-motion, you can't say a non-motion.
I think it was well taken.
All right, so that's a Will motion and a Paul
I have a
second.
question before we do that.
Okay,
How many cannabis task force members have to vote to approve it to adopt it? 5 of us? Is a quorum, right?
we need 5.
Okay, well, that's not possible with the people in this room. It wouldn't be the same 5 people that were present, so they can't approve it. I mean, unless you want to just do it, but that's not. Up to you, sorry.
Jane was right.
Catherine isn't here and she's one of the 5 that were here. Jan isn't here and she's one of the 5 that were here. So that would only leave Nara, myself, Jen, and Will, which is only 4 people. Not the same 5 people who are here, but the people who are here can approve minutes from a meeting they weren't in attendance of.
How does that work with that? Jane stepping down?
Jane was right.
It's
So
still a
then-
quorum of the body, not a quorum of those present. Otherwise, we can pass 2-to-1 things in like planning commission when we're down to.
So I don't know if there's some other type of way that we could approve the minutes, but it can't be based on the vote of those people who are present.
What about September 18th?
September, 12th.
Hate to throw your 35 minutes of work out the window, but
No, it's way better than.
All were there by Zoom, but they didn't vote on it, but they were present at the.
yeah, so can their vote count towards it?
Heck, yeah. Wait,
That-
wait.
Or is it- Because if they
Couldn't
weren't
vote.
exercising their presence during that meeting,
I'm gonna say yeah. And then county council can come jump on me later if anybody has a complaint.
then I've done my due diligence,
All right.
that's all I care about.
Yeah, good. And Holly, you heard me, so
Thank God for you.
I think we're, yeah, no, that was totally helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
But,
I couldn't hear what was said at all.
okay, so
Do you want me to tell Holly what I said? Or are we just kidding?
no, you don't speak loud enough. She didn't hear.
I can speak loud enough.
All right,
I'm just
project.
saving everybody.
Please.
So,
Go right ahead.
so Holly, if you can hear me, I just pointed out that the individuals present in the room are not the same 5 individuals who are present at the September 5th meeting, creating a little bit of a conflict when approving these minutes, but we have resolved it. Members of the task force who were present via Zoom will be able to vote to adopt these minutes.
Yes, because they are present physically today.
But the members in the room who were not present at that meeting will have to abstain from voting to approve these minutes.
There you go.
Okay.
All right. If anyone would like to make a motion, that would be awesome.
I move to approve the September 5th minutes.
We have one more hand raised in the Zoom room. Is public comment still open on these minutes?
Certainly.
All right, go ahead. Michael Green.
Green.
Withdrawing my motion, I guess, for the time being. Is that-
Well, we have a motion and a second. We'll move to second with discussion.
Just confirming you have a quorum present in person today.
Indeed, yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? And are there any abstaining? And that was Rebecca and a second by, who seconded that? Did you get that?
Nara.
You got it, good, all right. Thank you, moving on. September 18th task force minutes.
Now the type.
Now we cannot do these minutes because this is where we didn't have people on Zoom.
Yep.
All righty, tabling those minutes because we cannot take them up for action. Holly, hold on to that comment. Wait, no, sorry, not whatever you have your hand raised for right now, but unless it was the comment that I told you to hold on for the September 18th, because we can't take a vote on it. But actually,
Did you hear the comment?
It would? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah.
Okay, so my comment is, if you take a look at the chart, everything's changed. So it's now *1, *2, *3. *2 is cannabis processing or manufacturing incidental use. Now, if you look at the chart, and unless I'm misunderstanding it, under type 11 and under type, I think it's 13, you have 2 *2s under SR, but there is no manufacturing or processing that's allowed in SR.
We have 2 *2 in which area? The
11 and 13.
Okay, so type 9 and type 11, excuse me, type 11 and type 13 under SR. You have an *2, which is only for processing or manufacturing incidental use. But I don't see any place on this chart where you have manufacturing or processing in an SR. So how can you have an incidental use?
I don't have the chart.
This one?
Yeah, I don't have the asterisk, but divided, at least in the minutes that, or the packet that you gave me. So if you want to speak to that, then.
Holly, can you repeat that?
Okay, so under the asterisk, there is now a separation amongst asterisks. And so instead of saying just incidental use only, it calls out what type of incidental use. So on type 11, I think it was, and type 13 on SR, it has an *2, which is incidental to processing or manufacturing only. But I don't see anywhere on this chart where there is any processing or manufacturing in SR.
Well, cultivation is allowed in SR, and
Right, but that's not called out.
a cultivator processing license is different than a processing facilities license. So as an incidental use with cultivation, and we can bring it up in our ordinance here, a certain level of processing is incorporated into every cultivation license. So.
But that is not what it says. If you read what, there's one that says incidental to cannabis cultivation, one that's incidental
So the
to processing.
two should be a
or
one.
So I guess that's a matter of what the asterisk denotes in the legend.
Yeah.
Because on this chart, it denotes allowable only as an incidental use to permitted and licensed commercial cannabis activities, which would be different from incidental to commercial cannabis cultivation. So that's what the issue is.
Okay, I'm not sure what chart you're looking at, because that's not the one that I have that came with the minutes.
So, yeah, so what it sounds as though the confusion is in the explanation of 2. Because allowable only as an incidental use to permitted and licensed commercial cannabis processing, it fails to also describe that this processing is part of cultivation also. So it doesn't differentiate.
That would be type 3.
It
So
doesn't
Holly-
differentiate between, one moment, it does not differentiate between the processing that is included within a cultivation license versus the processor license that is standalone. Is that
Okay, so maybe it should be type 3 then.
Hey, Holly.
Mhm.
On the chart that you have, what does your legend say by the asterisk at the top of your chart?
I have *1, *2, *3. Is that what you're saying?
No, above that, above the table that's on the chart.
Yep.
You know, it has a full dot, it says major use permit, a blank dot says minor use permit. What does it say next to the asterisk on your chart?
The next to my asterisk, and it's below the major use permit and minor use permit. It says allowable only as, it goes into this long thing. And type 1 is cannabis cultivation, 2 is cannabis processing or manufacturing, and 3 is cultivation, processing, or manufacturing. So I think you're saying that maybe these two SR2s should be 3s.
It makes sense to me that that type 11 SR should be a 3.
Hold on.
And I'd like to add something to help clarify, because I see some people, some task force members in the room. The asterisks on the table refer to incidental uses, to whatever the use was. And then in the list of descriptive uses, the next page, that's where those asterisks were, I had broken them up into 1, 2, and 3 that specified what accessory or incidental use it was. Recently, I think Maria and Ruby had discussed it and gone back and added those numbers to it for clarification. It's not so much meant to be a change, just a clarifying aspect within that table. I believe that was on November 22nd. So I don't know, maybe Maria and Ruby can kind of speak to that to kind of clear up what I'm seeing as potentially some confusion in the room.
Table we have in here only has an asterisk on it. It doesn't have any numbers or that big long spiel.
And
That's
I
what we
think
talked
if,
about.
I think if there were changes made in that regard, apparently that changes the perception of the chart. So I think those changes should be brought before the committee to be accepted and approved rather than made.
So everything was emailed to everyone.
Yeah, but if a change was made that wasn't approved, it's obviously changing the perception of how community members are perceiving the chart. So if that's not what the task force approved the chart as being, I'm just voicing concern around that type of activity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I understand.
And in the effort to be more specific as to the type of initial cannabis activity that must be acted before you can have this incidental permit, I think we've muddied the waters or not been consistent in our license.
So, but it could be clarified if we just become a little more, actually, the 3 includes cultivation, processing, or manufacturing. The 3 in type 13 is the same. Cannabis processing or manufacturing. If actually we just get rid of the 2, or just get rid of the 3 and make 2 the wording of 3, doesn't that clear that up? Like, so we just have a 1 and a 2. Let's take out 3 because right now 2 is problematic.
Okay.
And make the 3 the only other one that we have. I think that would clear it up.
Okay, and then as far as, because what Holly's saying about the chart here, as far as having that asterisk separated, we're not gonna do that then.
No, it's
That
gonna
the
stay in the
only
narrative.
separation.
Yeah.
Okay,
And this is only, this table is not like our table in stone. This is sort of supposed to be a visual aid, but it's actually just ended up being a lot more confusing. The list itself is super helpful going forward. And eventually, when we go into, when we create our own article, we may not even have this table at all. So we don't have to worry too much about the table having 1s, 2s, and 3s or being broken out to that level, because the narrative and our development standards are really gonna help spell that out. So that being said, Holly, would you agree if we take out number 2 description and just make the description for number 3 and all the 2s and 3s?
I don't get it.
Is there a real reason to have more than 1 asterisk if we can just make the language for the 1 asterisk all encompassing?
well, that's, yeah, I think that.
No.
Okay, to follow this through, then why is it that you have under type, I'm sorry, I can't read this stuff. One of those you have, and maybe it's type 10, you have 1s all across everything that has cultivation and 2s all across manufacturing.
How about we remove the asterisks? I mean, how about we remove the numbers?
Yeah, just leave it as an asterisk.
Just keep it as an asterisk.
That's the way I had designed it originally,
Yeah.
just an all-encompassing asterisk on the table, and then as a separate list derived from the table where we got into more specific details, which were the 1, 2, and 3.
Right? So let's just not adopt those asterisks. I mean, those numbers. And we're back to licensed commercial cannabis activities, which is broad enough to encompass everything.
Yeah, so you can
That
only
works.
activity if you have the license, right, yeah, I think that's the best way to go.
Okay,
That's all we're saying, we don't want to have a standalone distro in an agricultural zone or
good. All right, so September 18th with the removal of all of those super number things.
I understand the intent there, so don't mean to
Yes.
slander good intent, but,
Oh, no, yeah.
What you have.
but I did.
Before we chase you all out here screaming with your eyes crossed, let's just simplify this and move on.
Okay, we can't adopt them, though, right?
Correct.
All right, so
But I think we have additional clarity, so when they come back, it'll just be.
You guys are minutes if you will.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Holly. Making sure we got through that. That was good.
One more set of minutes.
I
One
have
Just
point seven minutes. Can we approve these today?
just to clarify, the PowerPoint is still reading October 13th, but it's the November 13th meeting. So-
Yeah, and that was on the agenda too, so we're good to go.
Jennifer, were you on Zoom at the start of this meeting? That was my question. Yes. Okay,
Why isn't that in the minutes?
so that should be noted differently because if,
If task force not present.
yeah, no, she's not present at all.
Oh,
Because if she's denoted as being present somehow, we will be able to adopt these minutes. And if she's denoted as not being present at all, we will not be able to adopt.
President.
1:13, yeah, right there at the
I
top.
was on Zoom until then.
Yeah. So
Good.
does there need to be any type of change made to that?
So we amend present by Zoom, we amend the beginning of the minutes, to present by Zoom, Jennifer Smith,
That's what I would.
Yep.
and then she was present at 1:13, so.
Good. Okay, so that amendment, to note at the top that Jennifer Smith was present at 1:13. Any other questions, comments from the task force before we open this up to public input?
Yes.
Yeah. Seeing none, let's open this up for public input. Are there any public comments for November 13th minutes?
I do not see any hands raised.
Bringing it back to the task force for action.
I'll make a motion to approve the November 13th minutes with the amendment for Jennifer Smith present on Zoom until 13:13 and then the first half.
We have a second.
I second that.
You and all those in favor of approval of the November 13th task force meeting?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? And any abstentions? Thank you.
Robert would be an abstention.
Oh. Because you didn't attend in Zoom that day.
Sorry, I hate to like when those minutes come out and be like, oh, these people were here.
All right, will you care to
Very good
abstain?
for keeping us on task.
Task force member, Gary,
Yes.
If there's one who
Awesome.
contributed.
one abstention. Thank you. Five.
What are we gonna do then?
Discussion on general application requirements. Back to you, Andrew.
Okay. Moving on, we touch upon this slide at most of our meetings, an overall outline, but a very simplified outline of the ordinance we are working on drafting. With that said, as we, basically as we wait for our zoning, licensing, and permit types to move through other bodies for recommendation, eventually for final approval by the Board of Supervisors, we've kind of started to dive into development standards, performance standards, and also last meeting, an overall review of Article 27, which you can see the outline kind of mixes in application requirements and plans required, as well as the permitting process and administration. It's all kind of jumbled and mixed together in our current ordinance, as you saw before and as we can touch upon today. So with that said, as we were looking at that last week, Maria brought up the fact that maybe just to start, approaching smaller chunks that we can kind of wrap our head around and still start making some progress on while we wait for that final item to come back. We talked about general requirements. Now in Article 2713, subsection AT for commercial cannabis cultivation, we have a list of a handful of general requirements that, after a table for development standards, which we looked at last week, then it jumps into all of these requirements. I'm not sure if any of you had the time to review all of these. Maybe you can kind of give a yay or nay or maybe or a little bit. We open it up because this is going to be more of an open discussion. We don't have to come to any conclusion at this point. But just to go through that list, the general requirements in this section for cultivation include state licensure and permits as required, state licensing delays, what to do when we encounter those, revocation notifications to the state agencies. At the time, it was BCC. Our ordinance refers to the Bureau of Cannabis Control. However, now we work with the DCC, Department of Cannabis Control. Record requirements, applicants, especially in their business registration requirements, background checks, background clearances, the qualifications for a minor and major use permit, property owner's approval, collection permits and clustering, permitted activities, operating hours, and I should say that really it's only specified for deliveries and pickups, not actual operations. And a few more, if you bear with me, duration of permits, which is 10 years, track and trace requirements. That's how the state tracks and traces cannabis products. Weights and measures, that's really where we work with the agricultural department, as well as access standards. So this was kind of the section for cultivation, those general requirements that we talked about last week towards the end of our review of the holistic look at the existing ordinance. Just a heads up, there are other general requirements for manufacturing, processing, and distribution, which are described in Article 2713, subsection AU. And then for every section after that, from AV, AT, on through the alphabet to AAB, the first thing it says is that it must meet the requirements of AU. But for now, since we just kind of started with that first part, we can open up this discussion before we move on to our second discussion, which is just starting to look at a better way to outline the whole ordinance to make it more user-friendly and functional for everyone who has to deal with it, from our cultivators and applicants to the community and environmental groups and all sorts of stakeholders and interest groups. So with that said, I can flip back and forth between these two slides, but I will leave it to the task force members for a discussion, if any. Any thoughts or concerns? Any particular, maybe you don't need to focus in on all of them, but maybe one or two just kind of raises some questions. I mean, this is the time to kind of open up that conversation. So. Holly, we're still with the task force. We haven't opened up public comment yet, but we will shortly.
And there are a number of items I'd like to discuss. So it's just,
This is a
I
good
think we
time.
need to go in order maybe.
So starting with state licensure and permits as required, this does signify the dual licensing requirements. So I don't anticipate changes of that because I've not heard of any changes in state. It will remain the dual processing.
So the one thing I'd like to address there is, and we've talked about it at length before with the board, to have some sort of conditional letter of approval to apply to the state so that we can go through the local process and the state process concurrently, rather than waiting a year and a half or so to go, just using round numbers, to go through the local application, then get permission to then go through another 8 months of the state, thus putting the process at 2.5 years.
Is there anything that does that in state licensing delays, Andrew, that section?
I can bring up the PDF. I can get out of the PowerPoint. But before I do that, would that be helpful? Would you guys want to look at the actual ordinance as we go through these one by one so you can see the text in context? But with that said, Jennifer, we had talked about that, especially as we were moving, the allowable use for early activation for cannabis cultivation. And it's in a sense, early activation aligned with our early activation permits, kind of aligned with the provisional licenses at the state. And that's where the state could move forward on those provisional licenses with some kind of letter saying, hey, we got this application, it's complete, it's moving through CEQA. The state has now, provisional licenses have sunsetted. The only license you can obtain at this point is an annual license. And in order to obtain that annual license, DTC requires, first and foremost, the notice of determination, which you cannot obtain until the Planning Commission approves your project. In addition to that, supporting documents would be the initial study, as well as the conditions of approval, which serve as the signed use permit. So those 3 documents are not, they're only in draft form up until the Planning Commission approves it. And that's the only way that the state is going to be able to move forward with issuing those licenses. They can start the process, but they have 3 stages. One is the administrative review, which is like our completeness review. Then it goes into local compliance, less of an issue now because they get into scientific review, and the scientific review team will not issue any of those annual licenses without a full approval from the Planning Commission. So just a heads up on that. And with that said, do you guys want me to bring up the ordinance itself, get out of the PowerPoint?
There will be potential for provisional licenses sticking around for equity applicants. The governor just signed a bill this year in the fall that allows for equity, any equity applicants who still have a provisional license to keep that provisional license indefinitely. So that SB 51.
And applying for an annual really doesn't, that's not the issue at hand. The issue, they still have to go through an administrative review before the last part of it is scientific review. So at least if we're applying concurrently, at least we get in the queue and we get all that administrative review done. And God willing, maybe the county is done with their process and we can get the scientific / CEQA moved through. But, we're just asking to be able to start that very lengthy state process concurrently.
Yeah. Andrew, go ahead and switch over to the ordinance because I think all of us seeing the wording will be helpful.
Okay, give me 1 second
And
here.
be able to upload that so that they don't tell you that you're not complete in their portal. Also, there's a
So I know that, I think we had tried working on a letter previously, but we couldn't get anything that the county was comfortable with, yet the state would accept. Remember that, Andrew? I think that was right about when I first started here.
That is correct. That was part of the process to remove early activation as an option.
Okay. So, but let's make note of that. I'm not sure if it would go right in that spot. But let's make note of that as being something that we can take a look at someplace. As he brings up, skip past all that stuff, Andrew, get into the actual wording.
Okay, you guys seeing the ordinance itself?
Yeah.
All right, let me just scroll down here. Okay, here we go. So right after that table that we kind of looked at last week, I tried to make it a little more coherent in last week's PowerPoint. We go into these general requirements. This is the same stuff that was listed in the PowerPoint slide. So for state licensor and permits as required, do you want me to make it a little bigger? Is that helpful? Can you read that a little bit better?
Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and get it. I could read it out loud for those who have trouble seeing, but I'll do that upon request first rather than.
Okay, so what I see here then, instead of actually addressing A, what we have is a request to add a text, which would probably be its own clause, to allow simultaneous application processing through some letter that is a recognition of application processing by the state.
Would you like me to submit an example of an approved letter by the state?
An approved letter
From
by the
other
state?
jurisdictions?
Yes, that would be helpful in the future. Right now, let's just tag it as a suggestion coming from the task force. Is there any concern on the task force regarding that suggestion? If not, I'll take it as consensus and we'll add it to our list. Super. Okay, then B talks about if there is a delay in this on the state side, which doesn't quite address that previous request. C, notification of revocation, or does anyone have a question on B? Just talking about if the state's got an issue where you could still, we'll take a look at it after a year.
Yeah, we have come across this issue a couple times where we have issued the use permit. However, the applicants were still struggling to get through their state licensing process. And this pretty much outlines a way that, we can allow them to move forward. We can allow them to, but I don't think we can be more lenient than the state. So it's really kind of coordinating with the state. But this section really gives them a year. I think with provisionals and early activation, there was more flexibility in that sense. It seems like from our interactions with the DCC and with the annual licenses, they're much less flexible these days. So, but then again, NARA brought up the new legislation that maybe allows for some of that. Anyway, any questions on this 1 year? If I can get into some of if the permit is unable to provide proof of a valid state cannabis cultivation license at the time of that 1 year review, the county minor or major use permit may be subject to review and action up to and including revocation. So.
Question. At the top of this section, it says there, which delay is solely caused by the state. How is that determined? I mean, if what we're talking about is a clerical slowness from the state, there must not be some periodic, release from the state about which folks are presumed to be in good standing, but otherwise have not yet been processed. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, see, the thing about B is that it was pretty early on. And so, because what it's saying is that we can go ahead and grant a minor or major, which we are actually out doing anyway.
Sure.
So we've just been acting on this the entire time because of the requirement of that state that we get the local license, the local permit first.
Okay, I see.
So,
I think that much of this could be amended or removed, because bottom line, you either have your state permit and then you're able to activate or not.
yeah.
That's kind of where we're at these days. Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at B. Is there any reason to keep B? The one part that I like about it is the kind of the second half, in such cases where we're gonna take a look at it a year after, because it sort of, you're gonna have trouble cultivating without that state license. You're not gonna have your metric stuff and.
You can't
Right.
plants in the ground without.
Exactly. So this is, but then again, it's part of our normal process. If you got plants in the ground and you don't have state license, you got a problem.
Well, and
So
our,
it's not like this would alleviate that. huh?
and our use permits state that they have to be activated within 2 years as part of our conditions.
Mhm. Can we conceive of the state taking more than 2 years?
Not at this point.
Depends on the application that is submitted.
I mean,
Yeah,
and
if
this.
someone delays, if that would be the
The
applicant,
applicant.
right?
Right, but then it
Yeah.
expires pretty quickly at the state level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't answer your deficiencies within 90 days.
Okay, so is there any reason to keep B? Or shall we recommend removal of B?
I recommend you remove it. I think it seems redundant.
Any task force input? Opposed to keeping B?
Just to be clear, what Andrew's point got highlighted there does speak to what I was asking. I just hadn't read the whole section.
That's why I highlight. I was for you, Will. So.
Thank you.
I feel like it's an issue that should be addressed in our ordinance, but I'm not sure if it fits in this section, general requirements. So.
Yeah, I do think this is probably.
But we're not gonna issue a local authorization without a state permit, so.
No, we're not going to, we'll issue a local permit without a state license.
We'll build that.
But we won't, at that site, that first year monitoring site, if they have not gotten that state license, we better not see anything happening.
So you need to.
So that's a really good
You have to get
announcement.
the egg first, right? You have to get the county approval, then the state approval, and you have to have both before you can cultivate. So
And so maybe this goes back to, the whole process is that you're given your conditional letter of authorization. You go through the process both locally and at the state level. And then you're signed off, ready to go locally, but you don't get those conditions of approval signed until you show proof of your state.
Yeah. The way I'm reading it, and this is from somebody who's obviously never been through the process with the state and really understands how that would go, I would be worried, and this is just me thinking like an average person, that by reading this, it almost sounds like the county says, hey, you can go ahead, here's our permit, you can go ahead and start, and if in 1 year you don't have that state license,
Yeah.
now we've got a problem. So it almost looks like it's overriding the
I think
state
it's
too a little bit,
really
you know?
loose.
Okay, so how about take a look at it from a different angle though? If you've got an approved use permit, you can start doing construction because you have an approved use permit. You may
Right.
not be able to produce anything, but you could be building your processing facility. You could be doing all those things, which would be fine by the county because you have that approved use permit,
Right.
but not have your state license. So
Right.
it's kind of a leap of faith on that permittee's part that they're gonna get that state license. And in which case would this then apply?
This does specifically say they shall be deemed authorized by the County of Lake to engage in cannabis cultivation operations.
That's where I was reading that kind of threw
Well,
me
that's-
off a little
If
bit.
you read that, then it makes.
You might wanna tighten that up.
Because it's like, this almost seems like you're telling them,
Activation, yeah.
you can do this, and when your
Well,
state
what-
license comes in, just update us.
And why not just change it, I mean, I realize this may be a subject for a later meeting, but like, why not just change it to, shall be deemed authorized to engage in operations and activities that would, other than the cultivation.
Development
Yeah, like
activity
development that is not tied to cultivation.
Yeah, there's gotta be clarification, because that's early activation is exactly the problem that we had prior to
Yes.
that.
Yeah, we're not going back there. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so then amend B to say deemed authorized by the county to engage in,
But are we making recommendations right now or just?
we're actually just sketching notes right now.
So the next time that we talk about this for recommendations, will we have this with notes attached to it, or will the language, any language we've talked about today be amended?
Andrew, I'm envisioning a red line version.
Yeah, I mean, this is getting into our general requirements, and we do have 2 people waiting for public comments. But with that said, after we get through this discussion on these general requirements, if we can get through them in time, then we can get into the discussion of the overall outline. And maybe some of this stuff can be pulled out of these sections and put in other sections where they're more appropriate and have just a better organized ordinance as a whole, in which it would be presented ahead of on the agenda, made available ahead of a meeting that a motion is expected to be made on. But at this point, I think we've got a handful of meetings where we should really just, start having an open discussion on some of these points. So I'll get to some of that in more detail with the next part of the PowerPoint. But
I think we're on the same page, Maria. I just don't want to see anything disappear before we're ready to take action.
Mm-hmm,
So that way we still have the same frame of reference and we can have
mm-hmm.
notes made.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about our process right now because I did not take public input on A.
there was I don't think there were
There
any
wasn't
hands
any
raised.
action on A, okay.
But with
So-
B, we do have a couple.
Okay, good. I just
people.
I didn't want us to get too far so that the public has to write down a list of 10 things that they have to remember.
Well, then we do need to go back to A, sorry, because we need to make sure that we're using the updated state agency,
Yeah,
which is the Department of Cannabis Control. CDFA is no longer involved.
Okay, can we make a blanket recognition that all of this will be updated with the correct departments? So that we
Yes.
don't have to,
Or we
let's just make that a standing understanding, that it's all gonna be updated with whatever is the current title of the departments and their structures
maybe we
at that
just put-
time.
Or with language that says the appropriate state
State
agency
agency.
as amended, because they
Uh-huh.
change and change, so we could make
Yes.
the right language to last, so.
Good, okay, yeah, that's done. So then, yes, so then going to B, the comment on the task force was to amend that one sentence to, was it development? What was I liked the term that you guys had, what was it?
Development allowed, but not cultivation.
Non-cultivation
Site-
development.
site-
Development and
Activities.
It would be more than cultivation because if it's
It could,
manufacturing
because
or
it's-
retail, it would be
exactly.
cannabis on site.
But if you
Right,
said
would still build out.
Then site
Site development related to permitted activities.
Or non-cultivation development activities, so permitted under a major or minor use
Or
permit.
how about development activities not requiring state license?
Okay,
I don't know. I don't like that as much because I just think some people will interpret it differently.
Okay. What did you like better?
Why don't we,
Why don't we
Send that
just
over to the
make it,
lawyers.
yeah, okay,
That's a good
let's just
idea.
make that, we're gonna update this to make it clear that that
It's not-
people can move forward with stuff on their use permit that
Does
doesn't
not be a
require,
permitted activity.
exactly. Okay, and so we had hands raised for B?
We do. Can I make one comment before we open up public comment?
Yeah.
As we're kind of approaching this, we're diving deep into the fine details of an ordinance that we kind of get to rewrite overall. So the second discussion on outlining it is zooming out with the bigger picture to kind of look at all the components. We need to organize and put in this section here and this section there, and then we can dive into those details one section at a time as we have it fully organized. So I just kind of want to throw that idea before we dive a little bit too deep into this stuff. We could find ourselves in a similar confusing situation as the table from the ordinance that we tried to improve when
Well, I
we
hear
might have
you
wanted to replace.
recommending then that we finish up on B, move to that other item for the overall structure and then come back.
Perhaps, yeah, that might be a better way, but I'll leave it up to you guys.
Task force amenable to that.
Sure.
Then let's get public input on B, since we already talked about that, and then we will, we'll switch over to the discussion on outlining Article 73.
Let's stop it.
Yeah, just we're thinking, you could add qualifying language to the end of that sentence, shall be deemed authorized by the county lake to engage in operations subject to compliance with all the project conditions of approval contained within the approved use permit and the subsequent issuance of a state license. But that's a pretty wordy qualification, and to Director Turner's initial things, should be in there at all. I would think, yeah, when we zoom out, that we could probably take that out entirely, as that introduces more confusion than is needed. But if the first thing people read is that, oh, I got my use permit, I'm off to the races, and they're unclear that in that big binder of project, the conditions of approval, you still got to go get your state license. If we need to signal that repeatedly throughout the rewritten ordinance, that's probably not a bad thing, because some people don't read thoroughly. And if we're going to respect the dual licensing requirements and allow the use permit to be issued and say, okay, we're good, but make sure you go get your state license. We need to be crystal clear on that, because there has been confusion on that in the regular permitting process, and there was definitely confusion on that during early activation. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Any other hands?
Right. I think colleague Harris had a hand raised, but it's no longer raised.
All right, let's go on to the next item then, outlining Article 73.
All right, give me 1 second. Are you guys seeing the PowerPoint coming in here
yeah.
on the shared screen? Okay. I'm just going to open it like this. I'm not going to enter the presentation mode because it kind of mixes up the interface. But going on, these general requirements, keep them in mind. Let's come back to them. But I think one of the things that's confusing is this an application requirement? It's a lot of stuff mixed in here. Some are procedures, some you kind of understand the issues with that. But moving on to a discussion on outlining Article 73, looking at our current article, we have a section covering commercial cannabis cultivation, as kind of highlighted last week. It starts off with development standards, then it goes through 32 pages of general requirements and restrictions, etc. Then section AU through AW is commercial cannabis manufacturing, AX through AZ is commercial cannabis distribution, and so on, processing, testing labs, micro businesses. With that said, moving on to the next page, going back to the very origins of the task force itself, when a new ordinance was drafted, and we had a handful of community workshops on May 25th and May 26th, 2022. those workshops had broken down the issues into three main categories: land use and zoning, the environment and the community, and a handful of different subtopics. This is a summary of comments compiled from those workshops. We got a PDF of it. We can make it available and have it on the agenda. I can work with Ruby on that. But just to kind of zoom out and start to look at the big picture, again, I'm not sure how many of you had kind of looked through the overall outline of how the ordinance currently looks, which are these last handful of slides. But with that said, I just kind of wanted to touch upon that maybe we could start brainstorming on a better outline, a better structure for organization, and then dive into the weeds of all those details. So that's all. That was really quick. I got through that in about a minute, so we can go back to our development requirements, or general requirements.
Could you jump back there, please? I was distracted for a moment. I'm not sure that I'm clear on what we're doing.
Okay. The current ordinance, this is the outline of the current ordinance in this PowerPoint. I believe we have a PDF, and I believe Ruby has it up online. We can email it to all of you to take a look at. But
Okay.
you can just, if you just take some time and look at it, you can see some flaws with the organization of the entire ordinance. You got cannabis cultivation, you jump into, a brief table on development standards with no text to put it into context. Then you jump into general requirements, which is everything we're looking at, in somewhat of a random order. Some of them are application requirements, some are just rules on how a project should be, some of them are procedures for what to do in a certain situation. It's not incredibly coherent. Then you jump into prohibited activities, some of which aren't actually described as prohibited, which could be clarified. Then you've got protection of minors. Of course, we want that, but it's a weird section on its own. Then you got exclusion areas, and you've got two different areas in this ordinance with exclusion areas. This is just for cultivation. And then you have separate type of setbacks described, which constitute an exclusion zone for different processing manufacturing items. Then you get into permitting processing. I feel like the state license and license delays should be part of this section here. Moving on, this is just continuation of AT, commercial cannabis cultivation. Then you get in the property management plan and the 5 sections that are required, although they've kind of evolved and expanded, and people can add all kinds of other stuff to their property management plan. Some outlines on how to monitor compliance and the annual reports that we require, and then how to go into renewals. Then this is a really interesting section, 2713 subsection AU for type N and type P cannabis manufacturing licenses. Now these are very specific license types, so it's like, why go into so much detail on a similar list of general requirements for this section, but then every other section that follows, they say use AU, use this section here. So you've got permit requirements, okay. Then there's a section about notifying state agencies of revocation. That's more of a process than, a general requirement. You go on to parcel access to state or county maintained roads, okay. For manufacturing, or processing, the other activities, you need access to a county or state road. For cultivation, you need access to a county or state road or an easement that gets you access to that state road. There's another section on records and how they should be kept. Then you get into business requirements. It's kind of a duplicate of before, but potentially different, another source of confusion from applicants. Background checks, again, it goes into a separate section on it as if it were different from the others. Then it gets into qualification for a minor and major use permit.
All right, let me stop you right there.
Yeah, so you kind of see, this goes on for 34 more items. So yeah, you can
Sure.
stop me.
Yeah, good. This is a good time to stop. So what I'm trying to glean what you're looking for from the task force with this item. To me, it looks like the item should be sort of brainstorming how we're going
A
to
new-
clean
a
this
new
up
outline.
in the future.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
But I wanted to leave it to the task force to kind of drive that conversation than myself. So
Okay,
So having
cool. Thank you.
been through this in a few municipalities, it'd be really great if we had just an application that were the local mandates, like the zoning. just some basic stuff. And then within that application, you know, are you looking to cultivate, are you looking to manufacture, process? So there's that one application that everybody can go to. And then this, the checklist is within that. And then you get into the development standards by each type of activity.
Okay, so instead of application, what we're looking at is creating a regulatory structure or regulation, so an ordinance. How that would look then, in my own mind, as far as the ordinance is, that it would have sort of that large standardized general regulations, similar to what I think that we're trying to do with this initially, because that also mirrored the structure of the state regulations at the time. You had all of this big, huge intro stuff, your application and all that stuff, but then for each separate different type of license type, it then had that specialized information. And it wasn't repetitive, it would refer back as necessary to that intro stuff.
And then a lot of the intro stuff can be removed because you're not gonna get a state license without your LSW or your water boards. And so like locally, you shouldn't have to be looking for that.
Right, okay. And then, okay, so task force. We think that then so Article 73 would be somewhat similar to the structure of 72. However, we would take out a lot of the repetitive stuff. We would take out a lot of the, we would refer to, instead of the specific names of the departments, we would be updating that so that we would have a more nimble ordinance that would update automatically as the state updated in some things. Have any of the members of the task force given any thought to what they see Article 73 in your mind kind of looking like?
No.
Are you amenable to that type of structure?
Again, outline what the structure would look like with 72. I'm so sorry, I got, that's what you wanted.
Yeah, no, it's cool, it's cool. So Article 72 was trying to do it, and that a lot of the main sort of standardized development standards would all be in the entry. What we're looking for in your application, what types of plans we're going to be looking for, that sort of thing, that are in general, across the board, all permit types, or all cannabis permit types. And then later on, as it shows in Article 72, we broke it out for like manufacturing. This is also what we're looking for, but it's only for manufacturing. And then processing, shared facility, anything that the board says they want to consider, because it could be some new stuff, we don't know. But if it's stuff that's not already covered, we would refer to on-site consumption or a lounge. Please see, and go up to the stuff that applies to that as far as their application and stuff goes. And then here's the specific stuff we're looking for. That type of a format.
Okay.
I think that makes sense.
Okay, just updating verbiage, and then we'll start looking through all the things that we don't really need anymore. But for the meantime, right now, we can focus on the general stuff, the standardized across the board, all applications. We can look at that kind of development standard, but we can't really get into the weeds on the specific license or permit types until we hear from the board what they want to add. I don't think they're going to take anything away, but they may change some of the permit stuff. So, but
Where did this end up with the Ag Advisory Committee?
they met last Monday, and I need to prep the planning commission staff report for this next planning commission meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll be working with Catherine on that one too. Yeah. But I think the task force has mentioned that they'd like to see what is gonna go before a deciding body before it gets there, so I'll send that out, not for task force action, just only FYI. And we have 2 more minutes before we close out our meeting, because we're still, keep in mind, as we get more into the weeds, we're gonna stick to this 90-minute time frame, because it's gonna take a lot of mental activity, and I think 90 minutes is about what we can really do before people start.
Before we all tap out.
Yeah, before our efficiency and productivity wane.
On a On a final comment from the presentation, I did bring up these two documents, which I can work with Ruby to get them uploaded for further discussion at future meetings. This is a checklist of everything we require with an application, from background clearance, LLCs, documentation, site plans, written documents. We also, at the request of our applicants and other people, went through and cited each section of the ordinance where all of these are required. So those are going to be uploaded. And here we can get this. This is a summary from all the comments we received during those workshops. So those will be available online, and Ruby can send you an email with some of those notifications. Some of the stuff we've addressed already, like early activation, but others we haven't even started to talk about in terms of environmental issues and community issues.
Thank you. In the last minute, since we sort of got.
We have
on
one
where we're
public
going with
comment too.
Outlining Article 73. Was there any hands raised in the Zoom room on that, on Article 73?
Yes, we have one hand. Sarah Bodner, go ahead.
Sarah, you have about 30 seconds.
Great, thank you guys. I wanted to comment about the discussion around structure of the ordinance, that in my experience of working on a lot of these, and sorry about the construction in the background, is that it's really hard to do that kind of work by committee. So I think it would be prudent and time efficient to focus on the policy decisions that are going to impact the community for the task force members, and have staff simply propose an outline or a structure that you see as most beneficial, and then we can respond to it as an industry and as a task force.
Thank you. All right, closing out this part, we're moving on to any public comments in general, not related to an agenda item that's covered today. Is there any public comments?
We have Holly Harris with a hand raised.
Go, Holly.
Oh, hi. I actually had wanted to know what exactly are area-specific standards? What are you referring to under development standards?
Well, we have a certain level of room to, address those. But I mean, think about exclusion zones or farmland protection zones, or within
Okay.
this area, this might be required.
Okay.
Like, I think one of those recommendations in that document was a 5,000-foot setback from the lake. That would be an area specific around Clear Lake. So
Okay, so how does that
think about it in terms of
blend in?
here, Holly, with development standards, when we're looking at area, community environment, size, density, setbacks, how it's affecting the general area, as opposed to performance standards that are more site specific. What's happening on the actual farm? How are you doing your electrical? I imagine this is where the fire districts would want to be involved, our building division, those specific site-specific standards versus how that site is affecting the overall area.
Okay, so my question is, how does this relate to the area plans that are being updated this next year?
Well, we don't have those yet.
It does not. This reflects area specific in terms of project site.
Okay,
Yeah, think of vicinity, like we were talking about at the beginning of the meeting. So,
All
Thank you.
right, if there are no further hands, we're gonna go ahead and adjourn. Anybody? I can't see. Andrew?
nope, no more hands.
All right, thanks everybody for attending. Our next meeting is 2 weeks from today, right? Is it? Yep. Andrew?
Last meeting of the year.
Sorry, that is correct. I was muted. So,
Oh, excellent.
and we'll bring at the next meeting, we'll bring a calendar for 2024.